There are legends whose rise feels inevitable, as if greatness was stitched into their bones from the moment they were born. And then there is Dwayne Johnson, a man the world now sees as unbreakable, unstoppable, carved from stone itself. A man whose smile can light up entire stadiums, whose presence bends the room like gravity. But behind that force of nature is a childhood moment so dark, so shattering, that it still echoes through every victory he has ever claimed. Picture this: a 15-year-old boy sitting in the back seat of a worn-out car, his family on the edge of eviction. Again, the weight of poverty pressing against the windows. His mother, overwhelmed by years of fear and instability, suddenly steps out of the car and walks straight into oncoming traffic. The boy screams her name. Cars slam their brakes, horns explode through the air, and in that single instant, the world nearly stole the one person he loved most. That boy was not The Rock. He was just Dwayne, a kid watching the woman who raised him try to disappear because life had broken her spirit. A kid who learned at an age far too young that strength is not about muscles or power. Strength is surviving the moments that should have destroyed you. From that day forward, Dwayne Johnson carried a silent promise inside him. He would rewrite the destiny his family had been trapped in. He would climb so high that the darkness could never reach them again. But what he did not know was that his climb would be filled with wounds, betrayals, broken dreams, and battles that no crowd ever saw. And the first battle began long before Hollywood. It began with the anger that grew inside him after that day on the highway. After that day on the highway, something heavy settled inside Dwayne Johnson. It did not show itself in tears or quiet confession. It showed itself as anger, a deep, burning anger that wrapped itself around a boy who suddenly felt powerless in a world that kept beating his family down. And in the streets of Hawaii, where poverty lived around every corner, that anger quickly found a place to grow. Dwayne began drifting into a crowd that felt stronger than he did. A group of teenagers who survived by stealing from tourists, breaking into hotel lockers, grabbing whatever they could carry. Watches, clothes, small bags left behind by families who thought the island was paradise. Dwayne followed them because it made him feel less alone, less helpless. But with every theft, every late night, surrounded by the wrong voices, he felt himself slipping further from the life he wanted to believe in. Police records from that time tell a story many people would never imagine for the man who would one day be called The Rock. By the time he turned 17, Dwayne Johnson had been arrested around 9 times. 9 times in handcuffs. 9 times staring at the floor of a police station, wondering how a kid living in fear became a kid other people feared. He was not proud of it. Even years later, when he spoke about those nights, his voice carried a quiet guilt. He knew he was not a bad person. He was just lost. Lost in anger. Lost in shame. Lost in the belief that he was destined to fail, just like every adult around him whispered. But life has a strange way of placing a crossroads in front of the right person at the right moment. And for Dwayne, that moment arrived the day he looked in the mirror and saw someone he no longer recognized, someone he refused to become. He made a choice, a risky one, a choice that would push him into a new world, a new dream, and a new heartbreak he never saw coming. The choice that pulled Dwayne out of trouble was not fame. It was not money. It was football. The moment he stepped onto a field, something inside him clicked into place. For the first time, he felt direction, discipline, a reason to wake up before sunrise and push himself harder than every kid around him. Football became the escape hatch that lifted him out of anger and into possibility. He trained relentlessly. He studied plays. He became the kind of teammate who never walked, only ran. And soon the kid who once sat in the back of a police car found himself holding a scholarship to the University of Miami, one of the most powerful football programs in the country. It felt like a miracle, like destiny had finally decided to give him a chance. Miami was a battlefield of giants. Every player fought for a future in the National Football League, and Dwayne fought harder than all of them. He lifted until his muscles screamed. He sprinted until his lungs burned. Coaches praised his fire. Teammates admired his drive. He felt for the first time that he was standing on the edge of greatness. But greatness can shatter as quickly as it forms. One collision, one wrong angle, one burst of pain ripping through his shoulder, and the dream he had built so desperately began to collapse. Dwayne tried to push through it. He tried to hide the injury. He tried to convince himself he was strong enough. But the truth was undeniable. His shoulder needed surgery, and the moment the surgeons closed the final stitch, his path to the National Football League closed with it. The boy who had survived childhood chaos now faced a new kind of darkness. A dream broken not by his choices, but by fate itself. And the worst part was still ahead. Because when he thought he had already lost everything, life was about to show him just how far a man can fall. The surgery healed his shoulder, but it did not heal the hole inside him. When Dwayne Johnson returned to the field, he was not the same player. The fire was there, but the power was not. Every tackle reminded him of what he had lost. Every practice felt like a ghost of the dream he once carried. And in the world of elite football, ghosts do not survive. Professional teams passed on him. His name stayed off the lists. And when the phone finally rang, it was not the National Football League. It was the Canadian Football League. The Calgary Stampeders offered him a spot. Not the glory he imagined, not the future he hoped for, but it was something. A chance. A final chance. He took it. But the reality was harsh. He slept in tiny rooms. He earned barely enough to survive. He shared a cramped apartment with 3 other players. And instead of the roar of a stadium, he woke to the sound of his own doubts whispering in the dark. He told himself to push harder, to fight longer, to never quit. Then came the day everything broke. The coach called him in. No warning, no comfort, just a sentence that punched him straight in the heart. We are letting you go. No team, no home, no dream, nothing. He packed his bag and flew back to Miami. When he arrived at his family home, he opened his wallet. Inside were 3 things: an expired driver identification card, a crumpled $5 bill, and a single $1 note. $7. That was the moment that stripped him bare. A former athlete without a future. A young man without direction. A son returning home with nothing but disappointment in his hands. But in that moment of defeat, a new path was quietly forming. A path he did not expect. A path that would transform a broken young man into one of the most beloved figures on earth. Standing in his small childhood bedroom with only $7 to his name, Dwayne Johnson felt a silence so heavy it almost crushed him. He had failed at the sport he believed would save him. He had returned home with nothing. And for a moment, he wondered if this was all life had planned for him. But destiny has a strange sense of timing. Sometimes it waits until a man is completely broken before it begins to rebuild him. One morning, after days of staring at the ceiling, Dwayne walked into the kitchen where his father sat. Rocky Johnson, a former professional wrestler, looked at his son with an expression Dwayne had not seen before. It was not disappointment. It was recognition. The recognition of a man who knew what it felt like to be defeated. Dwayne asked him a question that would change everything. "Do you think I could do what you do?" A pause. A long breath. A slow nod. The world would one day call him The Rock. But back then, he was just a young man, searching for a place to put all the pain that was tearing him apart. Wrestling became that place. The ring became the arena where he could transform heartbreak into strength, discipline into identity, anger into purpose. But the beginning was brutal. Crowds booed him. Fans held signs mocking him. He was rejected night after night, humiliated under the hot arena lights. The company tried everything: new costumes, new names, new gimmicks. Nothing worked, until the day he stopped pretending. Until the day he stepped into the ring and spoke with his real voice, his real fire, his real truth. And the audience felt it. The boos turned into cheers. The anger turned into charisma. The kid with $7 became the man who could electrify millions. But wrestling was only the first transformation. A far greater one was waiting in the shadows. A transformation that would push him into the brightest lights of Hollywood and into the darkest heartbreak of his life. As The Rock conquered the world of wrestling, something remarkable began to happen. Hollywood noticed. Producers, directors, stunt coordinators, all of them saw something in him that went beyond power and presence. They saw timing, humor, heart, a kind of cinematic magnetism that could not be taught. And soon, the invitations started coming. First small roles, then bigger ones, then entire franchises. His schedule exploded. Film sets in one city, arena shows in another, red carpets glowing with flashes that blinded the night. The world cheered as he soared higher than any wrestler before him. But while audiences saw a superstar rising, Dwayne Johnson felt something else beneath the surface. A quiet drifting, a slow unraveling, a distance growing where closeness used to live. His marriage to Dani Garcia, the woman who had supported him since college, began to crack under the weight of that impossible schedule. She raised their daughter. She managed his growing career. She kept the house steady, while he ran at a pace no human could keep forever. And little by little, the foundation of their marriage began to strain. There were missed dinners, missed birthdays, missed moments that never return. There were long flights, lonely hotel rooms, and nights when the applause from strangers felt louder than the silence waiting at home. They loved each other. That never changed. But love is not always enough when life pulls two people toward different futures. When the separation finally came, it broke him. Not with anger, not with drama, but with grief. Pure, heavy grief. He described it later as a time when the world looked dim, even when the sun was out. A second wave of depression, deeper than the first. And yet, through that heartbreak, his fame only continued to rise. A man losing his marriage at home was becoming a legend on screen. But the higher he climbed, the more the shadows behind him began to stretch. Because Hollywood success does not come alone. It brings whispers. It brings jealousy. It brings storms no camera ever captures. And the first storm was already forming. Success is never quiet. And in Hollywood, the higher a man rises, the louder the world becomes. For Dwayne Johnson, this truth arrived not as a single headline, but as a wave of storms that followed him from set to set, studio to studio. It did not matter that he worked harder than anyone else. It did not matter that he carried entire franchises on his shoulders. Fame, real fame, always asks for a price. The first storm arrived through a courtroom door. A $200 million lawsuit tied to the series titled Ballers accused the producers of stealing ideas from two writers. The case centered on creative ownership and legal arguments, but Dwayne Johnson's name was dragged into the headlines simply because he starred in the show. He had not written it. He had not produced it. Yet the public often believes the loudest headline, not the quiet truth behind it. Then came a second lawsuit. Stranger, wilder, one that read more like a chaotic novel than a real legal document. A former wrestler accused hundreds of people and organizations in one enormous filing, including Dwayne Johnson, claiming an impossible conspiracy tied to kidnapping and intimidation. Experts called the lawsuit bizarre, unrealistic, a case destined to collapse under its own weight. But damaging words, even when untrue, leave scars. As if legal storms were not enough, whispers spread through the industry about his body. Rumors from commentators and former athletes questioning whether the physique that made him iconic was truly natural. Dwayne responded with honesty about his past, acknowledging that he experimented with substances when he was a teenager, but firmly denying any current use. Still, in the age of constant opinion, truth often loses to speculation. And then came the Black Adam saga, a film he poured his soul into, a film he believed would reshape an entire cinematic universe. When the box office numbers disappointed, critics accused him of inflating results, pushing narratives, and trying to control the future of the franchise. Suddenly, the man celebrated for his work ethic was being framed as a symbol of ego and overreach. But storms do not break a man like Dwayne Johnson. They shape him. And while Hollywood continued to pull at every corner of his legacy, he made a choice that no one saw coming. A choice that would take him far away from explosions, muscles, and blockbuster formulas. A choice that would reveal the deepest, rawest version of himself. When the noise of Hollywood grew too loud, Dwayne Johnson did something unexpected. He stepped away from the armor the world had come to expect from him. No more invincible heroes, no more unstoppable warriors. He chose a role that required something far more dangerous than physical strength. Vulnerability. List. The film was titled The Smashing Machine, a raw and bruising portrait of the legendary fighter Mark Kerr. Unlike the action roles that once defined him, this character demanded an emotional depth he had rarely shown on screen. Addiction, fear, loneliness, the collapse of a marriage, the slow unraveling of a man who could defeat any opponent except the demons inside his own mind. Dwayne poured himself into it. He abandoned the polished physique audiences knew. He embraced the brokenness of the real Mark Kerr. And when the film premiered at the Venice International Film Festival, something extraordinary happened. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered for minutes. Critics called it the greatest performance of his career. Some whispered the word that once seemed impossible in connection with his name: awards. But the world is never predictable. When the film reached theaters, the box office numbers were painfully small. The lowest opening weekend of his career. Headlines labeled it a failure. Analysts questioned whether audiences wanted a vulnerable version of The Rock. But for the first time in decades, the disappointment did not crush him. He said quietly, with a calm he had earned through years of battles, that he could not control ticket sales. He could only control the truth he brought to the screen. And that truth was about to lead him into the most important role of his life. Not as a fighter, not as a hero, but as a man learning how to rebuild love, family, and peace after years of chaos. For so many years, Dwayne Johnson lived in a world powered by noise, applause, cameras, explosions on screen, the roar of wrestling arenas, the pressure of box office expectations. But somewhere between the spotlight and the silence after his film premieres, he realized something simple and painfully human. He was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix. The kind that grows after decades of carrying the weight of other people's expectations. The kind that settles into a man who has survived poverty, heartbreak, broken dreams, and the relentless eyes of the world. And in that quiet exhaustion, life offered him something he never expected. A second chance at love. Her name was Lauren Hashian. She was calm where he was intense, soft where he was loud, steady where he was storm. Their connection did not crash into his life like lightning. It arrived like sunlight, slow, warm, patient, She saw not the superstar, not the global icon, but the man who still carried childhood wounds no one else could see. Their daughters, Jasmine and Tiana, became the center of his healing. He tied their tiny shoes. He carried them on his shoulders. He sat on the floor to build blocks and wipe tears and laugh until his chest hurt. These small moments were more precious than premieres or paychecks. They reminded him of the childhood he fought so desperately to protect them from. And with each quiet morning and gentle bedtime story, Dwayne began to understand something he had missed during years of chasing greatness. Victory is not always loud. Sometimes it is the warm breath of a child sleeping against your shoulder. Sometimes it is a marriage built on patience instead of pressure. Sometimes it is simply choosing to stay. But even as he rebuilt this new life, one truth remained. A man who has climbed so many mountains eventually must ask himself one final question. What legacy does he want to leave behind? Legacy. It is a word people often associate with trophies, money, fame, or the size of a man's career. But for Dwayne Johnson, legacy became something far more intimate. It became the answer to a question that had followed him since childhood. A question whispered through every broken moment of his life. Who do you choose to become when the world tries to break you? He had lived through the kind of pain that could have destroyed him. He watched poverty crush his family. He pulled his mother from the edge of a highway. He was arrested again and again before he turned 18. He saw his dreams of professional football collapse overnight. He came home with $7 in his pocket and a future no one believed in. He rose to superstardom only to lose the marriage he fought to hold together. He battled depression in silence. Twice, maybe more. He faced lawsuits, rumors, critics, and the crushing weight of being a global figure expected to never fail. And yet, he kept moving. Not because he was fearless, but because he learned to walk forward even when fear tried to anchor him in place. That is the real definition of strength. Not muscles, not fame, not power, but resilience. The willingness to begin again when everything inside you wants to give up. Today, Dwayne Johnson is not simply a movie star, or a wrestling icon, or a businessman shaping industries. He is a symbol of what a human being can become when they decide that the past will not define them. His name has traveled across continents. His work has inspired millions. But his greatest legacy is quieter than all of that. It is the reminder that greatness is not inherited. It is built. One choice, one setback, one moment of courage at a time. And if a boy with $7, a broken shoulder, and a bruised heart can rise to become one of the most beloved figures on earth, then somewhere inside each of us lives the same power. The power to rise again.